Hey everyone, I'm Rick Laduca and I'm with Blackstone Industries and DBA Handler Manufacturing LLC. I am here today with a very dear friend and associate, Dennis Urban, who I've known for a very long time. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Hey Rick, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us. This is a real great treat for me and a pleasure. I just want to start. I want to give everybody an idea of Dennis's background, and then we're going to get into a workflow conversation about the dental laboratory space, and not just for dental laboratories, but for dentists as well, because the dental laboratory space is important in dentistry, and it's evolving, right, Dennis, as it's been for years.
True. Yep.
So I just want to give you a little background. Dennis Urban is a certified dental technician, has over 45 years of expertise in the dental technology field, including lab management, technical training, sales and marketing, product development, quality assurance, teaching, writing, and lecturing. In addition to being a seasoned dental lab manager, Dennis has been an eminent lecturer to dentists and technicians worldwide since 1985. He owned and operated a full service lab on Long Island, New York for many years. His lectures and training span many years of dental technology. His technical articles have been published in numerous dental publications in the US, Canada, and Europe. Dentist is past chair of the National Board for Certification in Dental Technology and is on the executive board of the National Association of Dental Laboratories. Dentist is a consultant to both dentists and dental laboratories on workflow and successful case planning and is on the advisory board of IDT and JDT magazines. Dennis was the recipient of the 2007 NADL Excellence in Education Award and is the recipient of this year's prestigious 2024 CDT of the Year Award. That's a big deal. Dennis is currently the Director of Operations and Clinical Education for Microdental in New York. Dennis, that is some background and quite a number of accomplishments.
Thanks so much, Rick. And yeah, that means I'm getting old, all those accomplishments. But it's been a good run, and I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. I stay on top of education and what's happening in the industry, and I try to portray that through my lectures and my education and my writing in a positive way to help grow throughout our industry. And that's what I love doing. But thank you so much for having me here today.
You
Looking
bet.
forward to this meeting.
Well, as a longtime friend, I could tell you look fantastic.
Thank you.
Maybe I would guess maybe you started in the business when you were like 12 years old or
I
something.
think it was 13. Yeah, 13.
It's a
Yeah,
great background. Thanks again. So
thank
we
you.
want to talk about lab workflow. So, given your extensive background, I wonder if you could describe for the audience, Dennis, what it was like when you set up your first lab, because I'm sure that was a few years back. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, this a long time ago, but my first lab was more or less built out of immediate necessity. I rented a small space and utilized that space for many different workflows at the time. And needless to say, that was not very efficient. So when I moved to a larger location, I took the time to plan each department and create efficient workflows
Hmm.
for the lab. And or so I thought at the time. And then technology started changing, and it's important to have that foresight, and I'll talk about this in a little while, maybe more in depth, that foresight that you need to really plan your laboratory workflow in an efficient manner. So, especially with technology changing so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine for many people starting a business, a dental laboratory, you have certain priorities, certain concerns, one of those being financial concerns, bandwidth, process. And so, those things probably take precedent and maybe, workflow is certainly a part of that, but you have to make certain concessions when you're first starting out. As you mature and as you get the experience, you may go, I should have thought of that. I should have thought of that. Maybe
Correct.
I
Yeah.
should have done this before I did that. So
Yeah.
it is certainly, and that leads into my next question. What are some of the pitfalls or some of the problems that come up during the planning phase, or even when you've already implemented and you go, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, that's a great question because the problem of poor planning when it comes to workflow is that it can create gridlock in production and efficiency in the laboratory, and this can lead to decreased profits and in
Hmm.
labor and production. And that's detrimental to the business. And yeah, it can be severe and costly because these problems may not be severe on the onset, but for long-term success of the laboratory, it can be devastating, especially when it comes to overall production and profitability for the laboratory. And I've seen so many labs who don't look at the business aspect of this and the workflow aspect, and they have problems, by both financially and for the success, long-term success of the laboratory.
Yeah, great points. I have a kind of a common bond there because from the supply side, from where I sit, there's a cost of doing business, and sometimes
Yeah,
those costs aren't aligned with the buyer, the lab owner, because there's a budget or because they're starting out. But there's an old expression that's penny wise, pound foolish, and sometimes you end up paying in the long run for not making the investment up front. So I can
right.
sort of empathize with you and understand that. There are a lot of components to a dental lab, and it's
Yeah.
evolving, and it has evolved over the years, and will continue to evolve. How do you prioritize when you look at all the key components that go into making a lab? How do you prioritize those?
Well, I think first you have to look at and decide where you want to be and how big you want to grow. Yeah, so there's a
Mm,
lot of laboratories, being in the involved with the dental laboratory associations, NADL, and associations across the country. I get a lot of feedback from laboratories. Some laboratories just want to stay a certain size. They're happy with their workflow and the growth that they have. Some laboratories just want to keep on growing. So we really have to decide where you
mm,
want to be and how big you want to grow. And you mentioned about evolving. We have such a fast evolving industry that if we don't have the foresight to advance, especially with technology and the workflow options, and the result is going to be failure. When setting up a lab, look at efficient workflows, and look at technology, production, and keep in mind your safety and growth potential in the laboratory and your laboratory space. And just look at the options there for equipment and growth potential and the space that you have in the laboratory. Because I see that with our laboratories as I travel around the country. A lot of times with micro dental laboratory, they look at those future options with growth. So a lot of our buildings have the growth potential. Especially, and I'll get
mm.
into our building here and our new location here in Hicksville. We kept that in mind also.
Great point. I mean, what I'm hearing and I'm taking out of that is having a vision when you're
Yes.
when you're starting out. In any business and laboratory, dental laboratories are a business. They're there to take care of patients ultimately and do a great job of that. But it is a business, and I think you have to have a vision. And I think that's spot on. I mean, you got to know where you were and where you're going, short term and long term. So thank you for
Correct.
that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yep. No problem.
When talking about workflow in, my line of work, when I'm designing labs and I'm interacting with lab people and dentists, institutions, VA hospitals, schools, and they talk to me, and say, what do you think? And so I look at it and I go, well, when you're talking about workflow, there are a lot of considerations. There's, process, performance, safety, efficiency. You're currently the director of operations at a big lab,
Mhm.
Microdental in New York. A lot of people, a lot of responsibility. One of the biggest labs in the country, in fact. I know this is an ambiguous question, but
Mhm.
how important is workflow to microdental in the microdental laboratory?
Well, yeah, it's a great question because proper workflow is essential. And even though we have, I think we have 24 locations now around the country, we're not the largest, but we're growing. So with microdental and modern dental being one of the largest dental lab operations in the world with over 7,300 employees, there's
Wow.
no room for a lack of efficiency. So that's a definite. So we apply proper workflow requirements to each department and location with quality control and safety in mind at all times. And this is why when we moved into our brand new location here in Hicksville, New York, which is on Long Island, I made sure we became a CDL, a certified dental laboratory. And I did that in about a 6 months period because it was so important to me. And it's a lot of work to become certified. One of the
Mm.
few here, if the only one in New York State. So, but what is important to me, and this includes workflow, a certified dental lab adheres to FDA and ADA requirements, and it just raises the standards of safety, production, and education in the laboratory. So being a CDL ensures, that a dentist who partners with our lab will experience efficient workflow and high quality outcomes in a dental practice. So this is why it's so important to us to apply that,
Mm.
and in not only in New York location, but our locations around the country. And some locations may have about 4 or 5 technicians. Some of them have 150 technicians, but we have to apply that same protocol throughout our network.
I'm just that's just great feedback, and I think emphasizing the educational part of it and the certification is critical in our business. I mean, we serve people that don't really understand how the work is done or who does the work,
Exactly.
and those ethics and having that background is essential to patient care. Um, and it's what I think makes our business a little more unique than a lot. On that point, you touched on the size of the laboratory, and that leads to my next question. So, you know, you've been involved in a lot in the past, and now you're part of a big lab. But what about the small labs? Do the same principles apply? Do the same theories apply?
Yeah, I would say yes. No matter how small or large the facility, the same rules apply. It's just careful planning of each one of our laboratories and analyzing department to department setups. As far as what kind of workflow in each department, whether it be crown and bridge removals, digital technology. We have to have the right equipment, the right benches, and put in place those quality standards. And keeping in mind safety through and compliance also throughout the laboratory. So yeah, it's not just the larger facilities, but the same principles do apply to the smaller facilities also.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah,
I work with a lot of dentists,
mhm,
and it's funny how the industry has evolved in my 23 years of doing this.
yeah,
It was an afterthought with dentists. Not
mhm,
all the time, but generally speaking, a dentist would set up an office and then go, wait a minute, I
mhm.
need a place for a lab. And there would be a big scramble and chaos trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It
Right.
seems like that mindset is changing.
Mhm.
And a lot of the industry professionals, dealers, dentists, lab people are really giving that consideration up front. So even if it is a small facility, it's so important because, as you mentioned a while ago, time and money and patient care are essential to a profitable business.
True, true.
So you've seen a lot of changes in tech. You mentioned it
Mhm.
before. It was an analog business for a very long
Yeah,
time, and then we've had CAD CAM, really come a few decades ago and get refined, and now we've got additive manufacturing with 3D printing. So there's all these, I sort of feel sorry for dental lab salespeople because the number of things that they have to concern themselves with is mind-boggling. But
it's true.
how do you blend in a lab space? How do you blend, I'll say, the analog world and the tech world? Or do you see
Mm.
that it's all tech? Or, how do you explain that?
Yeah, but that's another great question because they both fit in together, and digital technology is evolving at a rapid pace. We all know that, and we need to
Hmm.
utilize the same fundamental prosthodontic processes to make restorations as we always have, and apply it to digital technology. So the clinician still needs to communicate effectively with the laboratory on information for a functional and aesthetic case. And digital technology is amazing with scanning, printing, and milling, and combined with the right software, it leads to a predictable outcome time after time. But that traditional aspect is merged with the digital aspect because we need to utilize the science behind the analog to apply to the digital for successful case outcomes.
It's still an art, right?
It's still an art. Yes, it's still an art. So even with the software that's out there, if you look at the software on case planning, say for instance articulation. If a fully adjustable articulation now is available in a virtual way on a screen, we have that at our fingertips on the screen on
Mm,
any one of these design systems, whether it be 3Shape, Exocad, or whatever design system you're using. But where did that come from? That came from the analog part, and now it's
mm,
applied to the digital. So that's only one aspect of it. And the same goes with all the other restorations that we're doing, whether it be partial dentures, crown and bridge, implant technology, surgical guides. The analog part of dentistry is applied to digital and they merge together for the predictable outcomes that we have.
yeah. And as we look at the industry, there's been a lot of consolidation on the lab side.
True.
Certainly the COVID experience has had an impact on dentistry, just like other parts of the world as well. So, with that, the advent of technology and the evolution of technology and the refinement of technology, it seems that a lot of dentists that are coming out of school today, and even dentists that have been practicing for a number of years, see the advantage of incorporating that. So, when I want to talk specifically about the dentist.
Hmm.
What would who has a smaller space, who may only have 100 square feet or 150 square feet to dedicate to an in-office lab, just quickly, what advice would you give that person?
Well, part of my job is to go visit a lot of dental offices and work with them on case planning and workflow. And I see a lot of various offices around the country, some of them really small, some of them really large. But, I have seen so many dentists who hastily set up their in-house laboratories without concentrating on workflow and,
Excuse me.
and the proper equipment. So
Hmm.
cheap and faster is not always better and not always beneficial for the patient. So just like with a laboratory, you just have to evaluate your workspace, decide on what restorations you'd like to concentrate on fabricating in-house, whether it be single unit crowns or if you want to print models or you want to mill, and do your homework on printers, milling machines, scanners, benches, and just make sure you adhere to OSHA and FDA standards. Because I've been in some dental offices around the country where some of the materials and machinery that is used they don't even adhere to OSHA and FDA standards. So you want to make sure that you
Yeah.
do adhere to that. And it's just the final restorations going in the patient's mouth there. So and then make sure you utilize education and technology to apply to your new technology in the dental office. And because I've spoken to so many doctors who say, oh, I bought a brand new piece of equipment. I'm not even sure how to use it. So make sure that you work with a company who does provide the training and support and education that you need to have successful outcomes on this new equipment in your laboratory space in your dental office.
So true. I think sometimes that's why I have a job, is because I get those questions all the time. And I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
talk about training. We're kind of getting near the end of this, and
Mhm.
I want to talk about training in just a minute. But it is so true. I think the beauty of our industry is, I, when I first started, there seemed to be a separation between dental labs and dentistry.
True.
And I see that gap has really closed. I don't see dentists do not want to be lab people.
Mhm.
They want to have some functionality and they want to be able to take care of some patients with certain applications more quickly. But they still have the relationship with the labs. They still have to make sure that the labs are doing the real work. So when you
True.
talk about advice for dentists, I'm totally with you on that, because there's still that collaboration, and I'm so happy to see that it exists. And every time I
Mhm.
talk to a lab, I sort of hear a lot of that, and it's a good thing, because it's good for the patient, it's good for
Yeah.
the community, and I think the dentists recognize that. So, but with regard to
True.
the training, again, in my experience, there are tools like Handler has some tools to help dentists or lab guys with their workflow.
Mhm.
But is there any real training? Is that something you do, or is there any real certified training program, like the business side of it for a dentist or even an upstart lab to
Mhm.
say, here's how you should, all the things we're talking about, here's how you should envision workflow and blah, blah, blah.
Right, right. And that's like you said, collaboration has increased dramatically, especially in the last 10 years, with implants and the
Mm,
digital technology. Uh, when I started out, the collaboration wasn't really there, and we need that for successful case outcomes. But I would definitely advocate training on workflow and communications especially with students and residents. It's going to help them become more business savvy and help them with case planning and the desired result of patient acceptance. As what I do in the industry, I give a course at the start of each semester to many universities and dental schools just on this subject.
mm,
And I have an ongoing monthly residence course on Zoom in which this topic is always included. So whether it be on occlusal splints, crown and bridge removables, I always include, the communication with the laboratory on workflow and case
mm.
planning. And I'm currently working on a chapter in the textbook with one of the largest dental schools in the country just on this topic. So
Wow.
to answer your question, it is very important. Not everybody is doing it. I think it's important, that is being implemented, that it is implemented, across the country, even in institutions. I mean, whether it be hospitals that have clinics and we have residents working there, they need to know the correct workflow and communication tools for a laboratory for a successful case. And I advocate that, throughout the country.
Well, that's fabulous. And I'm glad
Yeah,
that you're doing that. And
yeah,
I'm not surprised. Again, Dennis, I know we're friends and
yeah.
I don't mean to embellish, but I put you up there in an elite category of people who, with your experience and your
Thanks so much.
background, who can really help people. So
Appreciate that.
I think
Yeah,
you're welcome. I think we've come to the conclusion of this conversation. I want to say it's been an honor and a privilege for me as your friend and longtime industry associate. You've been very helpful, and
likewise.
I think
Yeah.
the information on this conversation can help a lot of people. If people want to reach out to you for help, Dennis, is that something you're open to? I mean,
Yeah, sure. I'm open to
yeah,
it. Yeah, they could reach out to me and we can, that's fine. We can,
okay.
they can
So
contact me.
we'll make that information available
Sure.
to the people at the end of this video. And again, I just want to say
Great.
it has been my pleasure talking to you, sir. It's always great to see you. I hope we get to see you at the next trade show and spend some quality time together over a cup of coffee or a beer. And I
Yeah.
wish you and your family and your business the best success and health.
Thanks so much, Rick. And if I can have one closing statement just to get a
Sure.
message out there, because you mentioned education, which is my passion. As I was proud to be honored with this 2024 CDT of the year,
Mm,
and it's because of my passion in the industry. I want to get across to dental technicians to become certified and raise the level of your career and knowledge because education is key. And to the dentists out there, communicate effectively with your laboratory on workflow, materials and case planning, and embrace new technology. It's changing rapidly. And I mentioned earlier the result of complacency and doing nothing is failure. But always keep in mind the ultimate goal is patient acceptance. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Rick, for this opportunity. And it's great to see you and great topics here today and topics that have become my passion in this industry for many years. Thank you so much.
you are welcome. It's been a great pleasure for me, and this has been so much fun. I hope we get to do it again.
Great. Thank you,
Until we
Rick.
meet again, Dennis, take care of yourself and thank you again.
Thank you, Rick. Same to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.